I will present the research related to my doctoral thesis. This is a multidisciplinary work based on a multi-methodological approach to magnetic resonance imaging. So, this presentation is organized as follows. First, I will make a brief introduction to magnetic resonance imaging, as well as to meditation, specifically to Sahaja Yoga meditation. Then I will follow with the state of art regarding the research about Sahaja Yoga meditation to also identify the outline of this research. From this, the general objectives and hypotheses will be drawn. And then I will proceed to talk about the different studies that we have carried throughout the PhD. First, a task-based functional magnetic resonance imaging study related to the praying practices in Sahaja Yoga meditation. Secondly, a probabilistic tractography study to explore the structural connectivity between key regions of emotional regulation. And thirdly, a seed-based functional connectivity study during meditation state and resting state. With all this information, a general discussion across the different studies will be presented, and I will finish with the conclusions of the dissertation. So, let's get to the introduction first. Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, is a non-invasive medical imaging technique employed to obtain physiological and anatomical images of the body by using strong magnetic fields. MRI is the core of this doctoral thesis, and in this case we have used the 3 Tesla MRI scanner available from the Service for Biomedical Research from this university. So here you can see a typical MRI scanner and its structure. There are 3 magnetic fields interacting to generate an image of the brain. First, the one generated by the radio frequency coils, then the magnetic field generated by the grading coils, and the biggest part, which are the coils producing the static magnetic field. In the static magnetic field, particles with the spin align along its direction, and when receiving a radio frequency pulse, these particles are tilted out of their equilibrium state for a very brief period of time, and then they return to their initial state aligned in the direction of the magnetic field. When this happens, energy is released into the system, and this is known as echo, and is the information that the MRI scanner collects. So the RF pulse sequences can be applied at different rates, generating different kind of images by changing the echo and repetition times of the sequence, which can provide information about brain structure and function, allowing us to differentiate key brain tissues, for example the gray matter, which consists in the neuronal cell bodies, the dendrites, and the unmyelinated axons, and the white matter, consisting of the long myelinated axons. So, by exploiting the different magnetic properties of these tissues, specific information about the brain can be obtained. For example, in the case of gray matter, we can observe the bold contrast, which is extracted from the magnetization differences between oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin. The bold signal provides key information about brain activation. In the case of white matter, the water diffusion can be studied to obtain information about the local microstructure of tissue. This process is known as diffusion weighted imaging. So from this, specific characteristic of the tissue can be derived, for example, the mean diffusivity, fractional anisotropy, or different connectivity indices. So in this thesis, these different types of MRI images have been used and analyzed through different modalities. However, before we can apply models and analysis, we need to carefully preprocess the data with the main objective of increasing the signal-to-noise ratio. A typical functional preprocessing will include the following steps. First, slice timing correction, which in a broad sense allows us to correct the differences or the delay error between the acquisition of the different slices of the brain, which, as you can see, are acquired at different times. Then the motion correction, which aims to correct the error caused by the subject's head movement during the acquisition. This process also helps to reduce the variance of error. Then the segmentation of the anatomical images, which consists in the differentiation of key brain tissues to extract the parameters that we need for the following standardization step. This step is just a spatial transformation of the individual's brains into a normalized space, so we are able to compare them. And finally, spatial smoothing, which increases the overlapping of regions between the subjects and allows to make inference of regional effects by complying with Gaussian random field theory. In the case of diffusion weighted data, these images can present distortions that you can see in the pictures on the left. These distortions are generated by off-resonance magnetic field, which can be generated by the electrical currents of the MRI coils, the subject movement, and differences in the magnetic susceptibility of the brain tissues. So this preprocessing is basically oriented to correct or spatially transform these images to correct the distortions of field resonance fields. So once the data is prepared, it can be analyzed and modeled. In the case of this dissertation, three modalities have been applied: task-based fMRI, functional connectivity, and probabilistic tractography. Each of these modalities corresponds to one of the studies that I will present later. So first, the Ball signal can be studied in different ways, for example, using task-based fMRI. In this case, using a task-based experimental design combined with the hemodynamic response function, we can obtain information about brain activation in relationship to a specific task. This is generally analyzed with a general linear model, which explains a response variable. In this case, this will be the Ball signal, in terms of a linear combination of a set of explanatory variables, which correspond to the effects that we have built into our design, as well as the confounds of our results, an error factor, and a set of unknown parameters which are associated with each explanatory variable. After we obtain the measurements, we estimate these parameters to best fit the model to the data. Then the statistics can be derived by testing for linear combination of these parameter estimates. So the Ball signal can also be studied for a sustained state or condition. For example, the resting state, where a person is not performing any particular task. And this method is particularly useful to identify or map the different brain networks. In this case, analyzing the functional connectivity is equivalent to or translates to analyzing the Pearson's correlation between our region of interest and the rest of the brain voxels. This allows us to understand how the different regions collaborate or antagonize between each other by observing their low frequency oscillations. And finally, to analyze diffusion weighted imaging, we have chosen to use probabilistic tractography. So this method uses the diffusion data as well as a local model of diffusion to infer fiber orientation in the brain as well as in its uncertainty in each voxel. This model takes into account the non-diffusion signal, the diffusivity of the voxel, the p-value and gradient direction of the acquisition, as well as the fraction of signal and anisotropic diffusion tensor of the fiber that we are analyzing. To put it simply, because I know this is relatively difficult, this method uses the estimated model and the uncertainty to build a probability map per voxel, like you can see here in the images, and then we propagate the fibers based on this underlying distribution. So these modalities are not isolated from one another, since we know that the functional patterns, functional connectivity, as well as structural connectivity and anatomical landmarks are closely related. It is known that the structural connections underlying functional connectivity also affect how strong this functional connectivity is. And furthermore, we can see functional connectivity in distant brain regions that may lack direct connections, but are supported by secondary tracks. So the presented analysis can be applied to different conditions and tasks to diverse population to study the functional and structural effects and changes in the brain. In the case of this doctoral thesis, we have chosen to study the meditation practice, which is a practice that involves focusing the mind to achieve a state of calmness and clarity. In particular, we are studying Sahaja Yoga meditation, where practitioners subjectively perceive the state of an inner subtle body, and throughout this subjective perception, they reach a state of mental silence, which is a deep meditative state where they have very few or no thoughts at all, while maintaining complete awareness. So meditation comprises a wide range of different forms, each addressing specific objectives or needs, and using different methods to facilitate this state of meditation. For example, by focusing on bodily sensations or the physiology of the body, in the case of directed methods, focusing on specific feelings or emotions, in the case of affective methods, and the absence of any content in the case of non-directed method. So, in this case, Sahaja Yoga meditation shares aspects with these three different groups. First, for example, the interiorized attention to the subtle body can be related to a directed method. Also, focusing on specific parts of the subtle body involves the enhancement of specific emotions or feelings, like an affective method. And then we also have the state of mental silence, where practitioners perceive very few or no thoughts at all, which could be compared to a non-directed method. So, now that the basics have been presented, I will show you the current state of art regarding this research. So first, it's important to know that in the later years, there has been an increase in the amount of meditation studies, and most importantly, also there has been an increase to their quality. Before these were published in very niche journals, and now we are seeing meditation results in very impactful journals. And in the case of Sahaja Yoga meditation, the literature on neuroimaging is not extensive, and most studies are relatively recent. So, previous literature on this meditation practice has revealed altered brain activations in the anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula in relationship to mental silence. Volumetric difference of gray matter between meditators and controls have also been studied, and one key difference was again found in both insulae. Furthermore, the functional connectivity of these regions was analyzed, and the results correlated with neuropsychological improvements shown by meditators in tasks of impulsivity. The volumetric alterations were also found in the anterior cingulate cortex. Again, this was further studied, revealing increased functional connectivity between the anterior cingulate cortex and both insulae. which correlated as well with the subjective perception of mental silence, thus confirming the key implications of the insula in maintaining the state of meditation, and particularly the state of mental silence. So, after this very brief update to the state of art regarding Sahaja Yoga meditation, the key points outlining this research are: first, that in the case of Sahaja Yoga meditation, where practitioners use movements and different recitations, only the state of mental silence has been studied, and it would be necessary to characterize these previous states that facilitate the state of meditation, since this could have an impact on the brain activity related to mental silence. Also, there are no existing studies of structural connectivity effects or white matter effects in Sahaja Yoga meditation. Most meditation studies are task-based, so the use of different methodologies would also increase our knowledge in the continuous state of meditation. And finally, some brain regions which have been reported as results and have been associated with functional alterations produced by meditation are still absent from the theoretical proposals in the research, so we think it will be beneficial to further study this. So, sorry. With this information, the objectives and hypotheses of the thesis can be drawn. First, the general objective of this dissertation is to apply innovative methodologies and experimental designs within the context of neuroimaging in meditation, and continue the recent work regarding Sahaja Yoga meditation from different perspectives. So, the general hypothesis of this dissertation would be then that Sahaja Yoga meditation affects the frontostriato-limbic circuitry at different levels, both functional and structural, as well as the executive functions in subcells. So with this idea in mind and the outline of the research, we can also define specific objectives. First, to analyze the praying practices associated with Sahaja Yoga meditation through a task-based meditation analysis that allows us to identify the bold signal associated with social cognition regions. Then, to study the frontal limbic structural connectivity using probabilistic cartography to explore regions associated with emotional regulation, and also to examine the differences between meditation state and resting state using seat-based functional connectivity, but also to further this study by comparing resting state between meditators and controls, also using functional connectivity. So let's get to the first study. In this case, it is important to remember that in Sahaja Yoga meditation there is a prayer component where the practitioners use prayers to achieve this state of mental silence. The information that I will present in this chapter has already been published in the journal BMC Neuroscience, the 13th November of 2023. This is an article of which I am the first author. So, previous research has revealed the activation of social cognition regions during improvised praying compared to a secular equivalent task. This article sets the base for our research here, and also similar effects have been observed in different systematic reviews of praying regarding social cognition regions, but also a diversity of functions. So overall, we can say that these findings suggest that praying involves a complex set of neural processes which are known to subserve executive control. So that the question that leads to our hypothesis is, does praying in Sahaja Yoga meditation also involve a social cognition aspect? So for this experiment, it is expected to observe both social cognition regions, of course, as well as regions that have been previously related to meditation, which could be like the anterior cingulate cortex, insula, or thalamus. So, for the study, 16 volunteers participated. All participants had more than 7 years of daily experience meditation. And then the tasks for the experimental design were as follows. First, counting backwards from 100 to 1 as a baseline task. Then 2 prayer tasks, 1 formalized prayer task in the Lord prayer and 1 improvised prayer task in the Mother prayer, but also 2 secular equivalent formalized and improvised tasks. All these tasks were presented for 6 times for 26 seconds in a pseudo-randomized order. And what this allows us is to have a design that accounts both for the language aspect of formalization and improvisation, as well as put into context the beliefs of the participants. For this purpose, we also control for the frequency of praying, as well as if they believe in the receptor of their speech, both for the praying tasks and the secular improvised tasks. So then functional scanning was carried using typical values, and prior to the functional acquisition, high resolution anatomical images were collected for reference. So then we proceed to the analysis. This included the comparison of the factors, comparing between prayers and their secular equivalents, also between formalized and improvised speech acts, and finally we also included an interaction analysis to test how, observe how these factors affect each other. With these comparisons, the group analysis was performed using a one-sample t-test, and the analysis were thresholded at typical p-values. So now I'm going to present and discuss the main results of this research. First, we found one characteristic cluster when comparing both domains. This means comparing both brain conditions to their both secular equivalents. And it was the deactivation of the thalamus. This region regulates the flow of sensory information to the cortex, and in this case it could be associated with the internal focus developed during the prayers in order to achieve the state of mental silence by strengthening the reduction of outside distractors. We also found an interaction effect in the medial prefrontal cortex. Here the graph on the right shows the average activation for each task in this region. As we can see, different combinations of prayer and improvisation or not activate differently the medial prefrontal cortex. And in this case, this result can be associated with the mentalizing and social judgment functions of this region. So, in conclusion, this task-based fMRI research has shown a social cognition effect related to praying in Sahaja Yoga meditation, which might be as well related to the later state of mental silence, where practitioners perceive a state of yoga, which shows trust in the receiver of their speech. We also found the activation of the thalamus, which we think is the characteristic cluster for the prayers in Sahaja Yoga meditation. And the thalamus has also been related to mental silence, so we can extend the result from praying to the meditative state. So now let's get to the second study, where the structural alterations related to key emotional regulation regions were explored. The research here presented has also been published in the journal PLOS ONE, and this is an article of which I am also the first author. So recent studies have presented evidence on meditation having effects on some major white matter trust. These studies have focused mainly in widely reported key meditation areas, like the anterior insula, when comparing meditators to controls, and the anterior cingulate cortex when comparing meditation training to relaxation training. Also, amygdala effects were reported and related white matter alterations or better white matter alterations with aging in meditators. So furthermore, as I previously introduced, Sahaja Yoga meditation has shown effects in the anterior insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. In this case, it was gray matter differences. And so we can see that the structural white matter alterations for this practice have not been studied. Furthermore, we can see that the previous meditation research has not properly characterized the frontal limbic circuit. So it can be hypothesized that Sahaja Yoga meditation could have an effect on the structural connectivity between these key regions and also affecting emotional regulation. 40 volunteers participated in this study, 20 meditators and an equivalent group of 20 controls. Meditators had at least 5 years of daily meditation practice, and they averaged 76 minutes of daily practice. So the diffusion images were acquired with a weighting value of 1,000 seconds per square millimeter, and one reference image with no diffusion weighting at all was also acquired, as well as a high resolution anatomical image for reference. Then, based on the Stereo Atlas, we defined the regions of interest in the anterior cingulate cortex, anterior insula, and amygdala as well. And then we carried the probabilistic characterography analysis as previously explained. Thus, we obtained connectivity parameters for each group and each pair of regions of interest. And then we ran a MANOVA analysis and examined the estimated marginal means of the model, which were corrected for multiple comparisons using typical p-values. So again, I will present the main results and discuss them. First, we found more robust connectivity between both amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex. This could be related to the top-down inhibitory regulation from the anterior cingulate cortex towards the amygdala. And it could also be related to the state of mental silence, where it is said that it teaches the meditation practitioners to observe their feelings from a detached witness state. So this could be key to regulate and control their emotions. Meditators also had more robust connectivity between the right insula and the left anterior cingulate cortex, as well as between both insula. As I previously explained, previous research or previous findings in Sahaja Yoga meditation have reported the both insula, but especially the right anterior insula, and it has been associated with the establishment of mental silence. Therefore, these results align with the attributed role of this area in inner awareness and interoception. So, in conclusion, this is the first brain morphometry characterization of white matter tracks in relationship with long-term practice of Sahaja Yoga meditation. We show that long-term Sahaja Yoga meditators, compared with non-meditators, have significantly more robust structural connectivity between regions related to emotional regulation. And finally, the third study, where we attempted to provide a comprehensive analysis of the striatal functional connectivity during meditation, or associating meditation as a state itself, but also as a trait by comparing resting state between controls and meditators. So the information here presented has been submitted to the journal Scientific Reports. This is an article of which I am also the first author, and I am also happy to announce that last week we received a positive answer, so it should be published soon. So first, in this case, the striatum has been shown to subserve motor, cognitive, and motivational processes, as well as their alterations. And furthermore, several fMRI studies have associated or found the striatum to be involved in meditation. These studies have associated the striatum to be involved in the onset but also the maintenance of the meditation state, and also have related it with altered reward and effects in meditators. In Sahaja Yoga meditation, the putamen activation and its functional connectivity was also associated to the subjective perception of mental silence, and it was associated with the top-down attention and emotional control. So therefore, it can be observed that previous research has reported striatal alterations associated with meditation practices. However, this region has been usually absent from the theoretical proposals and models of the neural correlates of meditation. So in this case, it can be hypothesized that Sahaja Yoga meditation would have effects on the striatal functional connectivity with key nodes of different main networks, both during the meditation as well as when comparing resting state between meditators and controls. This would translate in state and trait effects, or long-lasting effects. So 46 volunteers participated in the study, 23 Sahaja Yoga meditation experts, and an equivalent group of 23 non-meditators. As you can see, meditators average 14 years of daily practice and 85 minutes of daily meditation practice. The participants also carried different neuropsychological tasks. They filled in the variable impulsivity scale, as well as carrying the go-no-go, which requires a motor response to a go stimuli, which is the one you see on the left, and response inhibition to a no-go stimuli, which is the one you see on the right. And this allows us to measure motor response inhibition. They also carried the Simon task, which measures the stimulus response, conflict resolution, and interference inhibition. And it's important to remark that in this task, the meditators showed reduced or significantly reduced reaction times. So for the resting state functional scan, all participants were instructed as typically to lie still, relax, and allow their mind to wander while not falling asleep. And moreover, meditators were specifically instructed to not meditate during the resting state scan. So again, functional scanning was carried with typical values, and prior to the fMRI acquisition, high-resolution anatomical images were obtained for reference. Then one set of spherical regions of interest was created, generating a total of 12 regions of interest, 6 for each hemisphere. And then functional connectivity was carried as previously introduced, and the maps of the participants were then normalized and compared while correcting for multiple comparisons using Gaussian random field theory, with also typical thresholds. So again, I will present the main results of the study. First, we observed state effects. We're comparing meditation state to resting state in meditators. I want to highlight the increased connectivity between the dorsal caudate and the superior parietal regions, which could be related to an effect during meditation over attentional orientation, and also points to the caudate's role as a hub of the central executive nerve. We also found trait effects. This means, again, comparing resting state between meditators and controls. And we found reduced functional connectivity between the inferior ventral striatum and the mid-cingulate. This observed a wide range of functions, but this result was furthermore correlated with the reduced reaction time that the meditators presented in the Simon task. And so we related it to better cognitive control and the ability of meditators to inhibit interference in daily life. In conclusion, The effects of striatal connectivity can be seen both during meditation state. We observe functional connectivity alterations related to different brain networks like the central executive network, salience network, and default mode network. And we also can observe trait effects of this striatal functional connectivity with networks like the central executive network. And furthermore, as I just explained, some of these results correlated with tasks of interference control. So let's get to put all these studies together and get to the general discussion. So first, if we take into account the previous evidence of Sahaja Yoga meditation, linking the functional connectivity of the anterior cingulate cortex with the thalamus and the insula, and also we include the results that we observed in the first study in the medial prefrontal cortex as well as the thalamus, which we already argued could be extended to the meditation state. And we also add the increased robustness in structural connectivity between the anterior cingulate cortex and both the amygdala and insula, as well as including different functional alterations. In this case, I have chosen the relationship between the nucleus accumbens and the cerebellum and the sensory-motor cortex, but there are many others. We can conform a map where we can see that the effects of meditation over this fronto-striatal limbic circuit and affecting or related to top-down emotion and attention and control, as well as sensory regulation and enhancement of emotional and reward cues. However, this map can be further completed if we support it by known relationships between these different regions. For example, amygdalothalamic pathways, which are important or related to the reinforcement properties of sensory stimuli, or amygdalostriatal pathways, which we know are important for controlling goal-directed aspects and reward-related performance. We can observe that we have a system responsible for executive control in this frontostriatal limbic circuitry, where many nodes as well as their connections are being affected by meditation. So, in conclusion, we have provided insights on the neural basis effects of meditation on attention control, inhibitory control, emotional regulation, and other aspects related to the meditation practice, and through the use of multiple methodologies as we established in the main objective. And we also can draw specific conclusions. First, we have characterized the praying practices used to achieve the state of mental silence in Sahaja Yoga meditation through a task-based fMRI study. We have also depicted the white matter connectivity differences between expert meditators and controls in the frontal limbic circuit using probabilistic tractography. And finally, we have also defined the striatal functional connectivity alterations related to meditation both as a state and as a trait. And we have related it to neuropsychological measures of impulsiveness. I also want to highlight that during the development of this thesis, we have worked on other complementary research, which we are writing or about to publish. First, we further studied the praying practices by comparing meditators to an equivalent group of controls, and we can see that the thalamic deactivation that we said it was characteristic of Sahaja Yoga meditation still maintains when we compare both groups, so we are already confirming that. Second, we carried further research regarding the characterization of the brain activity related to the different parts of the subtle body that the meditators perceive. And we are also attempting to describe advanced state of meditation, also supporting it with physiological data and phenomenological interviews. However, from the results of this research, we can also draw several opportunities. For example, further research could explore the structural and functional connectivity alterations regarding other regions that I presented in the previous map and field theoretically. So we could further explore thalamic connections, medial prefrontal or amygdala connections, revealing key insights into how meditation affects this circuitry. We could also build on the presented results and further characterize the relationship between the different regions by using other methodologies like laminar fMRI or effective connectivity. And finally, the use of longitudinal studies would also allow for direct inferences about the effects that we are observing in meditation. So finally, I want to highlight the results of the research. Most of the content presented has been published, as I said in each chapter. I also presented for Congress communication to national congresses, and in compliance with the international PhD requirements, I carried a research stay in the Universität Klinikum Jena in Germany. So that will be all. Thank you for your attention.